Howdy, it's tubalcain, and this is part 3 of my series on building the 2x48-inch belt sander, based of course on the Kalamazoo, which you see over here. Now in the last part of this video I made the 2 wheels, so be sure and go back and watch that video. So those are ready to go, other than I still have to drill a set screw hole here that will go into the keyway. Other than that, those wheels are done. Now, I wanted to point out one other thing before I go on, that in the original one here, notice that this is an aluminum wheel, but it was a flat back pattern. See how deep it is here? It was not a split pattern. So that's how they went about making this at Kalamazoo. And that wheel is different than the other one that I have out in the garage. Remember, I have 2 of these, and the other one had a plastic wheel here. I don't know which unit is the older one, but they changed the design for some reason or another. Well, no doubt it would be to cheapen it. This would have to cost more than the molded one. Alright, the prototype here is based upon this Baldor 3/4 horse motor, 3450, but it is flange mounted. In other words, there are holes here on the end bell here, and everything is screwed onto that. That's how this is designed by me, with this plate on here. Now, probably for those that might make this, you're not going to have a motor like this. You're probably going to have a motor more like this, and this is really a bigger one than what I need. This 1.5 horse, 3450 RPM, 110 volt. It's a Century brand, or is it? Yeah, it's a Century motor, thermally protected. So, and it's a good running motor. It's used. I'm going to do something highly irregular here for my video. I am going to actually paint this. You know how much I dislike painting, but that's going to get a nice coat of, what is it? Dark gray Rust-Oleum. So what I'm going to do here is, I've talked in the beginning video on how to go about making this, and it could be made with 2 plates of steel welded together, but I'm going to try something here. I'm going to mount the plate here on these 4 draw bolts. Now these are only number 10s, that is 3/16 diameter, but I'm hoping that 4 of those, 1, 2, 3, 4, will be sturdy enough to give this thing the rigidity and strength that it needs. Now here's a possibility. I'm not going to do it this way, but you could take a plate of steel, perhaps a little bit bigger than this, put the motor on it, like that, lay it out, and I've already cut a hole into this one that is about the right size, and that could be welded on. However, I don't like the idea of welding, because you know it's going to be distorted. It won't be perpendicular, more than likely, and you might have to shim the motor. You really want this surface here to be perpendicular to the motor shaft, so that the belt will track. Otherwise you're going to have trouble. So if you're going to use this method, you could weld a piece of angle iron here, but angle iron is never truly 90 degrees, so it ought to be like 3/4 inch square stock or 1 inch square stock here, and using screws or bolts on that rather than welding. Some of you are going to say, well, you're not giving us any dimensions. Well, this is about 6 inches by 9.5 inches, and it's 3/16 thick. It might be better to have it even a little thicker, but I sometimes have to use just what I have in my shop. I'm not going to go down and buy anything. And I drilled I know it says 2.5, but it's a 2 3/8 hole with a hole saw. Did that yesterday. You didn't need to see that. So that being centered, that hole needs to be plenty big, just a clearance hole. Now what I'm going to do next is I've already taken out one of the draw bolts. Where is that? They look like that, and they aren't quite long enough. As you can see here, they aren't quite long enough to add a plate on it and still have room for the nut. So what I did, I just happened to have these in the scrap bin. This is 1024 threaded rod, and I already have one in here. So that one perchance is just the right length probably. So I'll put a nut on there and then another nut on here, and I think there's still enough thickness here for, or I should say length, for this and a nut to go on there, possibly a washer. That's my game plan. Do it any way you want. As I say, there are just endless possibilities for doing this. Boy, do I have a mess on the bench, but I usually do when I'm up to a project like this. Look at the way Kalamazoo did this. It's nice design. First of all, they made a base, and then on the base they mounted the motor, and then this upright piece it's welded right there. And then everything mounted on that plate, including the upright. So mine will be similar to that, other than I'm going to avoid welding. I certainly could do it, and it probably would speed things up. While you were nodding, nearly napping, I took the draw bolts out of the motor and cut the threaded rod to length with about ½ inch sticking out. They're just snugged up for now because they'll probably come out again. But with this metal laying here just as a spacer to center this hole approximately in the center of the shaft, I'm ready to start laying out the hole. Now I like to do one at a time. Lay it out, drill it, put it back on and do the next. That way they all line up. I know it wastes a lot of time, but what I did here was to take half of a ready nut, because they're longer. These are too short. A regular nut is too short to do what I'm going to do here. And then take the ever popular transfer screws, 1024 of course, and let's see, I need to show you this, I guess, how I do this. There's a transfer screw in that nut, and that just threads onto the end of one of the draw bolts, and then locate this exactly where I want it. I'm sighting here so that it's pretty well centered. That looks pretty good. And I'll take this beautiful hammer from my Canadian friends. And there it is. And I'll drill that one size over 3/16. I'll deepen that center punch mark a little bit with a standard Starrett punch that looks like this. I like those Starrett punches. Well, of course I like everything that's Starrett. They make the round and the square, I think you know. With one hole drilled, that gives me the chance to put this hole over this bolt like that, and I moved one of the transfer punches down here diagonally. This is all just common sense, but there's nothing so uncommon as common sense, I'm told. It's 20 minutes later. By the way, if you like my videos, tell other people. There's a thousand of them. Watch all of them. I had just a little interference right here, so I notched that out. This isn't tight yet. Now, in the comments, if you think that 4 1024 screws holding this together is not enough, tell me. I could have fit number 1224 rod in there if you could get 1224. That is one of the unfortunate things in our modern world, where they have gotten rid of number 12 and number 14 threaded fasteners. I think maybe you can get them a special order, but I don't have them here in stock. So that's what it looks like, and this is the basis then for mounting the rest of the machine. Now, this motor is fan cooled, and I have long been a critic of the type that draws the air through it here on abrasive machines. That's bad, but that's the way I'm building it. Of course, the Baldors here, Baldors, whatever you, these are sealed motors that are fan cooled on the end so that the grit can't get in there. That's just great, and that's the way I built this one, but this is the more common type of motor. By the way, there is overload protection there. Oh, I think I said that. So, anyway, then the critics are going to say, well, you blocked the air flow here. Well, you can, there's still air that can get through here, possibly not enough. I could drill holes here to allow the air to flow better, but if I ever do finish this and actually use it, it'll be for intermittent use, so it's really no big deal. Now I've got a cord out in the garage that's got a plug on it ready to go, and I think it's number 14, so that will come off. That's just temporary. I'd like to put a switch on it. I don't know if I will. I softened all the corners. I think there's going to be some notching done here later on anyway, so, and that, again, that's not tight yet, but I think that that's pretty good. Let's see how square it is. Okay, bring the square up. I know the table isn't very flat, but look at this. It's really not the least bit square. Alright, but that's invalid anyway, isn't it? I'm concerned with how square it is from the motor shaft. So, taking the square, well, we have an interference there, so I'm putting a 1-inch parallel right on the shaft. And it's very square, isn't it? Very perpendicular. So my method was, I think, valid, and I'm happy with that. And that will help with the tracking. If that's way off, you're probably going to have trouble tracking it. That's a repeat, I know. I just drilled and tapped the set screw hole here. That's 1/4 20. There's the 3/16 square key. And all of my measurements will be taken based on this being pushed all the way up, like that, and snugged down. I think I'll run the motor now to see if it vibrates. Well, there it is. It's running fairly vibration free. Not bad. These screws still aren't tightened. Oh, that's what I rattle is. Okay, looking good. One thing I would like to do to keep the wheel from working its way off, if the set screw loosens up, is to drill and tap a hole in the end of the motor shaft and put a washer and a bolt in there like you see over here. And I noticed, well, my idea came from the way Kalamazoo did it. They did that safety feature also, so let me give that a try. Here's my setup, as outrageous as it may seem. Note the small drill press vise that will keep the shaft from rotating. I'll go in about 3/4 of an inch deep. Well, perhaps a foolish detail, but there it is, a grade 5 bolt to boot. And with that type of detail, that's never going to come off, even more so if you put a little Loctite on it. I rest my case. I'm quitting for the day, other than I'm going to take just a few minutes to paint this thing. I know it's highly unusual for me with this Rust-Oleum. Maybe I'll even paint this. I will paint the other parts later on, but I'm going to paint the motor for now. That way it's got overnight to dry, and I've already cleaned it and degreased it, so it looks pretty good. And it's a good running motor. A little bit of end play in there. Probably could benefit by the use of a couple of shim washers. Nah. Good morning. 2 days have passed, and I submit for your approval a freshly painted Century motor. Looks a little better, doesn't it? Not something I like to do, but nevertheless the job is done, but it's still mildly tacky. Alright, let's get on with the build. And this build is getting quite tedious and long. I'm trying to present some of the operations and information that would be useful to you, not necessarily when you build one of these beauties, but when you just make anything in your shop. You know, these are just tips that are probably useful, and that's the way I do things. So let's go. I know that my workbench looks a bit like Sherman's March to the Sea, but that's how cluttered it gets as I work on a project, and I'm sure yours does as well. But now getting on with the topic here, I was thinking ahead about what kind of base will I use on this, if any. Now it certainly would be just fine to clamp this to the bench or bolt it to the bench, or to use a board of some kind, piece of plywood or whatever, as a base. But let's take a look at how Kalamazoo did it. They've got a stamped base and the motor is mounted to that, and then if I swing this around you'll see that there's an upright piece similarly made, and it's I can't tell whether it's just been bent. I think it's been bent up and then braced over here. Let me get a better look. Wow, it's a bit dirty under there. Yeah, that's all one piece. It's been bent. Now I don't have the capability of doing that, but they notched it and bent it, and they've got rubber feet on there too. I'd like to get some rubber feet to isolate the vibration. Well, I'm a bit of a junk collector, as you know, and it was quite fortuitous that I had this base in stock, and I'm not even sure where I got it, but whenever I bought this or grabbed it in a pile of junk, I think there was some other little piece of equipment or something on here, but really this is quite a nice deal. It's got feet on it. Now it's too long, so I was thinking that, well, that's exactly what Kalamazoo did. They notched it and bent it up. So that the purpose of that, of course, was so the sander could be used in both the vertical and the horizontal positions. And this then could be mounted as such. And since I can't bend that, like I just said, I think I will cut this off. Cut this off right about here. You clean this, paint it, and use that portion, and then possibly dedicate this later on, if I decide to, weld it on in the vertical position. But that's going to be an option, and by then I'm sure I will have run out of steam and not be in the mood, but we'll see what happens. Also, I'd like to mount a switch on here, and I don't think that there's room inside here. Well, I know there won't be room to mount the switch. So I found this also in my junk pile. I don't even know where I got these little narrow boxes. I've really never seen these on store shelves. But if that was mounted someplace here, well, I can't do it there. Maybe it would fit there. I have to think of some way of mounting it. And then if there's room inside of that, I'll use this Napa switch that I was in fact going to use on this one. But I may never finish this one since it's the prototype. So that's my plans for today or the future, whatever I do next year. I haven't even decided. As I started to lay out this line here on this piece, hidden by all the squares, you know, I was rooting through I needed a small square, but I was just rooting through some of my squares here. I'm a little ashamed to show you what a hoard I have here, and these are primarily Lufkin and Starrett, but there might be a few others in there as well, sheer Tomiko, but I do have a penchant for small squares, or a virtual fetish, if you will. But isn't that a nice selection? I hope it doesn't sound like bragging, because if it does, I'd like to cut this clip out. Alright, that's cut down to a usable size. That was my Wells bandsaw. You know, I can't for the life of me figure out why they got real long feet on one end and short ones on the other, but that kind of renders them useless as a quad. I wonder where I can get some new ones. So I think I'll drill another hole in the corners here for just in case I find some rubber feet. Again, there is the possibility that I may, well, trim this and weld that on. I don't know if I will or not, but that's a possibility. That's how that will look. I think I'll go ahead and drill some mounting holes, and then this is ready for the paint shop. Well, the base is all ready for the paint shop, and no one wants to watch paint dry, so that will conclude this part of the video series on the building of the sander. And in the next one, I'm going to tackle the hard part, which is the mechanism here, the post, the tensioning device, and the shaft for the upper wheel. So this is tubalcain saying so long for now, and I'll see you in the next part of this video series.